Hello, my brood. Let's start today's episode with an imaginative scenario. In this scenario, you are a research participant. You have signed up with a local university to do a study on how people perceive the world around them. You head over to the university one morning and you meet up with the researcher. The researcher brings you to a classroom and you stop in the doorway and you look into this room. The room is fairly empty. There is a chair facing you towards the doorway that you're standing in, and there's a second chair back to back with the first one facing the wall that you're looking at. At the side of the room, there's a small table on wheels, and there is some object on it about a foot by 1 foot by 1 foot, but it's covered in a sheet, much like you might expect to see at an art exhibit. The researcher asks you to come in and sit in the further chair where your back is to the door. And you do so, you sit down, and the researcher says, okay, please keep your eyes forward on the wall away from the door until told otherwise. I'll be back in 1 minute for you. So the researcher walks away, and obediently, you keep your eyes forward on the wall. The door is behind you, the other chair with its back behind you, and you wait. A minute later, as promised, the researcher comes back in with another person in tow, and they tell that person similarly to please come sit in this other chair and await further instruction. So you hear the other person, they sit down in the chair, and you are now back to back with this person. You haven't seen them, they're just another research participant in the room with you. And so the researcher says, okay, first off, the second person who came into the room, we're going to bring the table over with you and remove the sheet and just tell us what the object that was underneath the sheet is. And so the researcher pulls that table over, and you hear the wheels moving across the ground. And then the instruction comes, okay, I'll remove the sheet, and you tell me what it is. The sheet's removed, and the person behind you is humming and hawing, and they spend a few seconds just kind of trying to figure it out. And they come back and say, well, it's some kind of plastic, and it seems to have divots in it. It seems to be textured, and I don't really know. And it has all of these different bumps on it, and these there are these smaller pieces, and they seem to be much more jagged. And I don't really know. And they're spending all of this time trying to figure it out, and you are simultaneously a little frustrated, thinking, come on, how hard could it be? But at the same time, you're a little concerned. Well, when it comes to your turn, how hard is it going to be for you to answer this question? Nevertheless, another few seconds go by, and the person behind you finally says, well, I think it must be a toy of some kind. And the researcher says, thank you. And you hear them place the sheet back over the object, and then the table is wheeled over to your side. And so you are now sitting with this concealed object covered by a sheet in front of you. And the researcher says, okay, I will remove the sheet and just tell us what you think the object is. And the researcher removes the sheet, and you look at it confused for a second before saying it's a children's construction set. It's obvious. And the researcher says thank you, puts the sheet back over it, and says you are free to go. And so you stand up and you turn around thinking, what is wrong with this other person? Only to see that they were blindfolded the entire time. Let's talk about alexithymia. If you already know what alexithymia is, you might see where this scenario was going. But of course, before we start that, I am not a psychologist or any kind of mental health expert, nor am I a doctor or any kind of expert in this space. I'm just purely sharing my own experiences as I've gone along my learning experience. So, alexithymia is a state in which a person is not able to easily connect with or experience or be aware of their own emotional state. It doesn't mean that emotion isn't there. Alexithymics absolutely have emotion. It just means that they're not very aware of it being present. Alexithymia, it's not exclusively an autistic trait either, and it's not even necessarily genetic. Experiences we have through life may change whether or not we become alexithymic. Many people think that autistic people don't have emotions or have reduced emotions. And while it's a possibility, the reality is that we might just not be so aware that the emotions are there in the first place. Alexithymics, they may very well become excited and sad in their own ways. We might keep something on our minds or research about it or talk about it. We may miss people in our own ways. We may spend years talking about the things we did with them or trying to find others who can fill the hobbies that we shared. For someone with alexithymia, you might ask them, how are you doing? And coming back to our scenario, trying to figure out what the object is, an alexithymic might say, well, I woke up pretty early today and I was thinking through a problem and I was trying to understand how to solve this. And they just might go on and on and on. Whereas a non-alexithymic is asked, how are you doing today? And they might say, pretty good. Or maybe they say, oh, I'm in a bad mood. Maybe they say that they're upset or angry. The difference between these two people isn't necessarily that one wants to be particularly verbose about it and the other doesn't. The difference may just be that one is very aware of their emotional state and the other is trying to feel it out. Just like the person who is blindfolded and they're feeling the object and trying to understand what it is, an alexithymic might have to talk through what it is that they're experiencing. They may not have a simple word like happy or sad or angry or excited to communicate. They might have to describe what they're experiencing rather than give a simple definition. Life can be pretty confusing as someone with alexithymia. For me, I've spent many hours at restaurants where I see other people sitting and they're talking with friends and they're smiling and they're laughing or they're expressing frustration. And I've always wondered why they're able to do that. I've always wondered what is different about me that I can never seem to sit at a restaurant and be smiling and laughing and joyful. Or perhaps I'm out in public and I see a person being very affectionate with their partner or with their kids or with their pets. Or I'm out at a beach and the sun is setting and I see people having great pleasure just enjoying the beauty of this scene. To me, these things don't trigger any feelings that I'm aware of. But just because it's not triggering feelings that I'm aware of doesn't mean that they're not there. I think it's important to remember that just because someone isn't smiling, it doesn't mean that they're not enjoying themselves. And just because they're not crying, it doesn't mean that they're not upset. Reading people isn't necessarily easy, and assumptions or misread signals will happen. With a bit of understanding, we can create a world where facial expressions aren't the only indicator of how we're feeling. Listening to what a person is trying to describe, listening to the wordy explanation, or seeing that the person is trying to be alone, or seeing that they're trying to be with you, even if they're not saying or expressing what the feeling is, may tell you very well what they are experiencing.